guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, HOA Neighbor Calls Police on Me for Having Illegal Barbecue. It was a beautiful summer day, and I was excited to have a barbecue party with my family and friends. My brother and I were in charge of the grills and the smoker, and we had a brisket cooking for hours. I also had some wet clothes that I hung on a small clothesline in my driveway to dry in the sun. It wasn't long before my nosy and annoying neighbor poked her head over the fence and started yelling at me to stop the party. She complained about the smell of the grilled meat and the sight of the clothesline. She threatened to call the HOA and have them fine me and even get me kicked out of my house. It was absurd, and I tried to reason with her, but she wasn't having it. An hour later, 2 members of the HOA arrived, and my neighbor was still yelling about me, forcing my meat-eating ways on her, and putting dirty laundry in the front yard. Thankfully, the HOA members were reasonable and told me that I wasn't breaking any bylaws, and they would take care of my neighbor. They even accepted my offer of some delicious brisket and coleslaw. My neighbor was livid, but I didn't care. I wanted to get some revenge for her ruining my party. My dryer wasn't going to be fixed for a while, so I decided to hang all my wet clothes in the backyard on several clotheslines. I also started talking loudly with my wife about what kind of meat we should barbecue next and even mentioned some foreign meats and animal parts that my neighbor wouldn't have liked. It was petty, but I was having a blast. Days passed, and I didn't hear anything from my neighbor until one day when I was leaving for work. I noticed that my car had been vandalized with red paint and a message that read, "Meat is murder." I was angry and upset but decided to call the police to file a report. They took some pictures and promised to investigate. Weeks went by, and I hadn't heard anything from the police. I had almost given up hope until one day when I received a call from the detective in charge of my case. He told me that they had arrested my neighbor for the vandalism and for making threatening phone calls to me and my family. I was relieved and happy that justice had been served. Now, my neighbor is no longer living next door, and I can finally have a barbecue party in peace. The HOA has also passed a new bylaw that prohibits any form of harassment or vandalism, and I hope it will prevent this kind of situation from happening to anyone else in the future. Update. A few weeks after my neighbor was arrested for vandalizing my car and making threatening phone calls, I received some unsettling news. She had been released on bail and was now back in her house, which was just a few yards away from mine. I felt a knot in my stomach, and I knew that I couldn't let my guard down. Days passed, and everything seemed normal. However, one morning, I woke up to find that my backyard was completely trashed. The clotheslines were torn down, the grills were damaged, and some of the furniture was broken. I was in shock and couldn't believe that my neighbor had gone so far. I immediately called the police, and they came to investigate. They took some pictures, and I gave them my neighbor's name and address. They promised to look into it, but I knew that it was going to be a long and difficult process. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between me and my neighbor only grew. I tried to avoid any confrontation, but it was hard when I knew that she was just a few steps away from me. I installed a security camera in my backyard, but it didn't stop her from harassing me. One day, I received a letter from my lawyer. It was a restraining order against my neighbor, and it was approved by a judge. I was relieved and happy that I could finally have some peace and quiet. The restraining order prevented my neighbor from coming within a certain distance from me and my family and from making any contact with us. The next day, I woke up to find a package on my doorstep. I was hesitant to open it, but curiosity got the best of me. Inside, I found a note from my neighbor, and it read, "I'm sorry. I went too far. Please forgive me. I didn't know what to think. Was this a sincere apology, or was it just a ploy to get me to drop the restraining order?" I decided to talk to my lawyer, and he advised me not to respond and to continue with the restraining order. Weeks turned into months, and everything seemed to have settled down. I was finally able to have a barbecue party without any interruption or harassment. The whole ordeal had been stressful, but I was glad that it was over. I learned that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself and that the law is there to protect you. The next story is titled, Entitled Cousin and Her Entitled Daughter Thinks They Are Entitled to Stuff in Our Home. My cousin, Let's call her B, 38 female, is the second oldest among her 4 other siblings. I, 24 female, first noticed her entitled tendencies when she asked my mom if she could come to our house on that one Sunday night so she can use our Wi-Fi to research her lessons. She's a teacher and she just returned to our town after being away for so long. They do have Wi-Fi in their home but it's slow. Mom agreed thinking it was just a one-time thing since B knows we only have a limited internet data plan. She came to our house, used our Wi-Fi for 3 hours, thanked us, and left. Then the next day, she came back. And the next day, and also the next day after that, and so on. She also started using it for an hour or 2 longer. I got really concerned so I told my mom and she just shut me off because I was apparently being rude. In the end, our internet connection that usually lasted us a month, now didn't even last 2 weeks. That's when my mom started getting concerned. So, when B came again, Mom told her we lost our connection and we don't know when it will be coming back. She stopped coming for that reason after that, so I thought maybe she wasn't as entitled as I thought. Just clueless. But then every time she visited, I noticed she would knock or call us once and then would barge in immediately. Until the time came, she didn't even bother knocking anymore. Just straight up opened our gate and went inside our house. And it just so happens that I'm at the kitchen doing something. She'd come and ask me what I'm doing and then she'd start looking at the leftovers on our table. If she liked something, she'd eat it and I'm too flustered to even say anything. One time, I made dumplings for dinner. I eat early so by 5 p.m., the dumplings were already ready. She was at our house just to chat with my mom and of course she went to the kitchen to ask what I'm doing. I made just enough for us, 3 each so 12 in total. I wasn't in the bathroom that time so when I went to eat, turns out she ate 3. I got really mad, so I told her to stop treating our house as a free restaurant. But I was shut down by my mom for being rude, which I'm still pretty angry about. She'd also go to our garden and ask for fruits or veggies. She'd ask us for lime, and she'd straight up take probably more than a kilo's worth. Asked for malunggay, just enough for a soup, and she'd take a whole as branch. Another incident was when she suddenly went inside our gate and harvested all the ripe papayas on one of our trees without even asking. So, I sneaked in on her and asked her what she was doing. "Oh, I saw your papaya from the street, and I thought I'd harvest it for you." I replied with, "Thanks. How many is that? We're planning on feeding it all to our chickens. Would you like to do the honors?" It was pretty hilarious looking at her face getting mad that one by one, she lost all the papayas she worked so hard to steal. She ratted to my mom though, so I was reprimanded for not even letting her keep one, but I just shrugged it off. And then there's her daughter, F, 11, who's just as entitled as she is. She gets really jealous of stuff we have so we caught her multiple times trying to steal whatever caught her fancy. At first, she asked but would compliment it first like when she eyed on my markers. These markers are so pretty. It's a 36 color marker set which cost me a lot but I needed it for school. She'd follow it with, "I want it." I say no because I need it and she straight up replied with, "Just buy another one." I kept replying with no so she started whining and then went to my mom to tell on me. Mom doesn't really like the kid that much so she just said, "Ask your mom to buy you one," as nice as she could. And that's when she shut up. But she didn't really stop trying when they visit our house a few days after. My sister, N, 18, dislikes her because she keeps trying to steal her things. N loves pretty things, so her room looks pretty. Her bags are pretty. Her notebooks are cute. All her stationery looks really cute. She has cute keychains, cute clothes, and a nice collection of art supplies. That seems to really rile F up so every time she visits, she tried to steal 1 or 2 of N's stuff but she gets caught every time. But the audacity to whine and get mad at us for not letting her take make me mad. She also looks at N's clothes and tell her, "I'm calling dibs on this when it's my size," and my sister always replied with, "No." No explanations, just no. She'd tell on us to her mom every time who'd side on her with, "N, I'm pretty sure you'll stop wearing them someday so give them to F when that happens." And my sister always answered with, "It's my clothes. I decide what I want to do with them, thanks." Because of N's frankness, most of our relatives think she's a brat for like not giving her things to entitled people. I don't really get the audacity. All of B's siblings and their kids turned out respectful and good-mannered. I don't really know what happened to her. And now her kid is as entitled as she is but she's still young. She can still learn and improve but I don't know if that'll happen when everyone's coddling her. Me and my sister turns into the bad guys when we reprimand her and tell her what's wrong with her attitude. Even mom thinks we're rude even though she doesn't really like F. Thankfully, B got assigned to a different city, so we won't be seeing her and her kid much, but it's nearing Christmas vacation, so I'm pretty wary they'll come here again and demand gifts like they did last year. I'm just hoping it doesn't happen. The next story is titled, Rude Woman Meets Instant Karma. This is a short story my dad shared with my family a few days ago, and the ending was too glorious to keep to myself. My dad was at a grocery store gas pump during a pretty busy part of the day. According to my dad, he spent maybe 15 minutes just to get to a pump because some jerk would constantly jump in front of him, rather rudely, and occupy the spot instead. However, while most of these drivers just cut in front, the final encounter my dad had, some Karen driving a large fancy car, made the insane decision to not only cut my dad off with enough speed and hostility to cause an accident, but to also look my dad directly in the eyes and laugh at him as she did. Apparently, this Karen forgot the most important rule of driving: keep your eyes on the road. Why, you ask? Because as this woman cut my dad off, laughing right in his face, her very nice car proceeded to ram at full speed directly at the gas pump she was trying to steal. Bam! Instant karma. Unfortunately, my dad never found out what happened after, since he got the heck out of there fearing that pump would blow if he didn't. And while our smallish town didn't hear a loud explosion that day, it was probably safe to assume that woman definitely felt something. Folks, moments like these are what keep me smiling. Sometimes, you just want to see petty people get smacked in the face by karma's oh so loving embrace. Feels so good. Also, in case anyone asks, I think that woman is fine. There hasn't been any news report or anything about it, so if anything, she probably just had to worry about the damage to her car and the pump. But if something does come up, I'll probably post an update if people are interested. Either way, I find the best justice to be watching petty people learning harsh lessons as a result of their petty actions. There's nothing better, honestly. The last story is titled, I will be happy when my grandmom reaps what she has sown. So, my mum is overweight. My grandmom was a horrible parent who apparently went on tirades when my mum and her sisters were young about nothing in particular. Because of this, my mum developed an eating disorder and social anxiety. My aunts all have social anxiety too, and at least one of them also has a similar eating disorder. My mum is really the only sister in the family that actively has us around my grandmom, and probably only because she wants to see me and my siblings, her grandkids. Everyone else refuses to be around her if they can help it, only ever seeing each other at family gatherings, and even then, not everyone shows up. My grandmom also constantly berates my grandpa to the point I think she'd rather prefer a butler than a husband. My grandpa is a sweet man who has dyslexia. Because back when he was young they didn't have a way to diagnose or treat dyslexia, he was just told he was stupid, and grew to believe he was worth nothing except the manual labor he could provide. He's 78 now, and he got laid off as a forklift operator a year ago during COVID, because apparently they considered him a potential workplace hazard. With no work, my grandpa is becoming depressed, and it's not getting any better due to my grandmom seeming to think that he should just do everything for her. One of my aunts, who is a lesbian, this is important later, lives with her, and if her and my grandpa didn't live there my grandmom would starve. They cook the food, they clean, and she sits on her fat ass watching Law and Order all day. And on top of that my grandmom verbally abuses my grandpa quite a lot. She calls him fat, she's twice as fat as him and he's in good shape for his age, useless, that he should work when she knows very well he can't, and I don't know if she understands telling him he needs to work, or that's all he's good for is just really beating him down, and it's doing what everyone else has done to him. My grandmom also seems to be incapable of understanding when someone else has an experience that isn't face value. Me and my brother are autistic, he found out before I did, and we both have sensory processing disorder too. When my grandmom found out she became confusingly offended, as if someone had just diagnosed her instead of my brother. She exclaimed that, "That's just my brother," and telling us we shouldn't need to give him medicine because they can't fix how someone is. I heard this secondhand through my mother, and I almost lost my shit. How ducking dare she say that? I have to live with a brother who at the drop of a pin could fly into a panic attack, and she has the audacity to say that this is just him. I love my brother and I don't want to see him so miserable. Why is that bat so incessant on things she can't understand? Recently, I was diagnosed with something similar to my brother along with OCD and GAD, and I told my parents never to tell my grandmom because if she found out and tried to say those things, she said to my brother to me I might go insane. I also a while back came out as non-binary to my parents who were very accepting. But again I have not and will not tell my grandmom about it because I guarantee she will if anything refuses to use my new name and pronouns strictly out of spite. To help calm me with the stress of coming out, my parents told my aunt was lesbian, and she had told my grandparents who were apparently fine with it, but it does explain quite a lot. It explains why my grandmom makes all those strangely sexual jokes about women in front of my aunt, or why she doesn't seem to like her going out because my aunt might meet someone. A couple months ago, for a present for my grandpa, me and my mum wanted to record my grandpa telling stories about his family because he's very fond of talking. We were going to compile the stories and some pictures into a book for my aunts and my grandpa. He has a huge box of photos in their basement, and we had called my grandmom to ask her to get them out before we came. We told her we needed them so we could ask my grandpa questions to get stories out of him. This phone call was about 3 hours before we went over, and when we finally come over, we find the pictures nowhere to be found, and not only was my grandmom just watching television, but she hadn't even told my grandpa we were coming over. Her excuse: "You don't need those old pictures. They're too buried down in the basement anyway." Going downstairs, we find the box of pictures in plain sight underneath something else. While we were recording the stories in the dining room, my grandmom sits in the living room refusing to turn down the television and interjecting into our conversation once every 10 minutes to say something redundant. Needless to say, I despise my grandmom. I think I love her because she's family, but I'm beginning to think that it's not deserved whatsoever. I am going to revel in the guilty joy of when my grandpa passes away and she gets sent to an old person's home and nobody comes to visit her. She'll be alone because she couldn't care enough to love anyone. We all gave her chance after chance after chance, and she refused it every time. Thank you for listening.